Today I will be responding to Andrew's proposition, which is inherent segregation in cities affects all of its citizens negatively. His first claim is segregation is expensive. His second is segregation causes lost potential in its residents. And his third is segregation negatively affects housing. So first of all, over the whole topic is not really much controversy because segregation is negative and even all of there is relevance in the topic. So today I'll be trying to focus my argument on the claims he used to support it. So for his first claim, segregation is expensive. The evidence he used is pretty much all hypothetical. For instance, he used if the levels of economic and African American white segregation are reduced in Chicago, the average income for African Americans would rise by $2,892 per person. And he used more examples like that to support his points for this claim, which doesn't really explain how segregation is expensive. He just gives the statistics on how it could be improved, but not really on why it's expensive. He doesn't even mention how it can be done to reduce segregation. The evidence just stated and the audience is expected to infer that because improvements can be made to the economy, then we should believe that segregation is expensive. But there is no real evidence that shows segregation is expensive. I found a piece of evidence by metro planning. They state affluent households are more able to comfortably afford high-cost options in certain communities, while lower-income households spend higher shares of their income for lower-cost options in different communities. The result is a self-reinforcing cycle in which inequality creates segregation, and segregation furthers income inequalities. Therefore, I believe that segregation isn't actually expensive, but it is caused by low income, which forces many to live in communities in which the income level is the same. This brings to the second claim, which is segregation causes lost potential in its residents. So first of all, for the evidence, one of the first points to support his claim doesn't really mention a source. He states that segregated neighborhoods have a higher rate of homicide, and there's no really source to support that evidence. And he mentions homicide and PTSD to support his claim, but I feel like these two topics don't really support on how potential is lost in residents. And he also mentions how African American and Hispanics would be more likely to participate in higher education if segregation was reduced, but there was no source on that either, even though that was one of his his best examples to support his claim. There was no source which makes his claim unreliable. There was once, again, no backing for the evidence given, and the audience is expected to infer that segregation causes the loss of potential in its residents, but the evidence of homicide and PTSD in Chicago doesn't really explain loss of potential, and there is no explanation on how segregation causes homicide and PTSD. I believe that segregation causes also loss of opportunity, but not potential. Segregated communities may not be able to afford programs for children or may not have a stronger education, therefore they lack opportunities to have a higher education in the future. Stanford KIPA states that between district, segregation may be particularly consequential for achievement gaps because there are often substantial differences in school and community resources among school districts. So some students may not have the same resources that others do, therefore they do not have the same opportunities that they have. So the next claim 3, for his evidence, once again he did not use backing to support his evidence. It's hypothetical again and does not state evidence. It directly shows that segregation affects the housing negatively. He mentions that if it's hypothetical because he mentions that if regional homicide rates were 30% lower in Chicago in 2010, residential real estate value would increase by at least $6 billion, which doesn't really support on how housing is affected by segregation. It's enforcing that they could be improved, but there's no real evidence that it's effective. The audience is expected to assume that since the economy of segregated communities can be improved, then segregation is actually affecting housing activity. Although I believe that unfair housing leads to segregation. Metro Planning states that the Metro Planning Council states that current government policies tend to benefit those with existing wealth, such as homeowners who receive federal tax benefits. People of color are disproportionate recipients of predatory loans, even when they have similar or better assets and credit scores as whites, in part due to discrimination in the banking and housing industries. What I'm trying to say by this is that most people of color are discriminated against, and they do not get the same opportunities that others who are more wealthy or as wealthy as them because of their color. Therefore, it's not really that housing is affected negatively by segregation. The segregation it comes from the unfair housing for the people who become segregated. And that's all for today.
All right, the presentation, I think, is affecting a little bit some of the ability to pick out the arguments that you're making. There's a lot of reading that's going on, and some of the phrases are so similar without explaining what it is that you mean. I think there are a few places where you do stop and try to explain the points that you're making. Like right at the end, I thought you had a pretty good example where you need to make it clear. The problem is that there is discrimination against people because of racial issues. It's not, and the housing segregation is a consequence of that. It's not that housing segregation causes all these problems. It's merely one of numerous symptoms of this kind of discrimination that exists. That argument makes more sense than half of the things that you're saying, where you're basically making the claim and then saying, and that doesn't prove the claim, and then saying, and there might be something else that's related to this. And it really feels like you are either nitpicking on the language that the advocate used, or you are interpreting the evidence in a way that is not the way the advocate was using it. And that happens repeatedly. And I think the problem, like I said, is that you are sometimes focused so much on the way you've written things in your notes that you haven't really stopped to explain what your argument is in a lot of places. And you need to do that a little bit more. I could pick out a few places where there were challenges to the evidence that you presented or that the advocate presented. You suggested that there's not a source on some of the information. That's an okay press. But if they had a source, what would your answer be? I think that would be an important part of the argument to include. And you don't usually do that sort of thing. You just move on to the next press that you've got. I think it comes down to the notion that the housing segregation is really a reflection. These are all signs that some kind of discrimination is going on, or that there's some problem in the social system. And would things be better if we didn't have that? I don't know that there's any argument that there wouldn't be better if we didn't have those sorts of things. I'm not sure anybody denies that. So where is the controversy on this? The controversy is that the advocate's attributing it all to housing segregation, and your argument should be that there are multiple causes, and that's a lot simpler and clearer than some of the hair splitting that you're doing on some of the evidence and some of the claims. Like I said, I think you need to look at this a little bit more and make the argument instead of just sort of reading these, the parsing of the language of the advocate's argument. That's not that there isn't a reason to maybe sometimes do that, but you got to tell us why it matters, and I don't really get that, except, like I said, I thought on the last point you did a better job of that than any place else. All right, thank you.